The wind screamed like a living thing as Jake Martinez pressed himself against the rocky cliff face. Salt spray from the massive waves below stung his eyes and made it hard to see. Hurricane Delilah had turned from a Category 3 to a Category in just 6 hours, catching everyone by surprise. Jake's research station was gone. He had watched it get torn apart piece by piece through his binoculars before running for higher ground. 20 years of marine biology research destroyed in minutes. His boat was probably halfway to Cuba by now, assuming it still existed. The island of San Pedro was supposed to be safe. The weather report said the hurricane would pass 50 miles to the north, but hurricanes don't read weather reports, and Delilah had changed course like she had a mind of her own. Lightning split the dark sky, and for a moment Jake could see the cave opening about 30 feet above him. It looked big enough to shelter in, maybe deep enough to escape the worst of the storm. He had no choice. The wind was getting stronger, and staying out here meant death. Climbing the wet rocks was like wrestling with the hurricane itself. Every gust tried to tear him loose and throw him into the churning sea below. His hands were bleeding by the time he reached the cave mouth, but he was alive. The cave was deeper than it looked from outside. Jake pulled out his waterproof flashlight and swept the beam around. The walls were smooth, too smooth for a natural cave. Someone or something had carved this place, but the work looked ancient. As he moved deeper, the sound of the hurricane faded to a dull roar. The air inside was surprisingly warm and dry. Jake's clothes started to steam in the heat. He found a flat section of floor and sat down to catch his breath. That's when he noticed his equipment was acting strange. The portable scanner he used to study fish was beeping softly. The electromagnetic readings were off the charts. But that was impossible. There shouldn't be anything down here that could generate that kind of signal. Jake followed the scanners, readings deeper into the cave. The walls became even smoother, almost like metal. Strange patterns were carved into the surface, glowing faintly with a blue-green light. The deeper he went, the stronger the readings became. The tunnel opened into a massive chamber that took his breath away. The ceiling stretched up into darkness and the walls curved in perfect arcs. In the center of the chamber sat something that definitely didn't belong on Earth. It was a ship, but unlike any ship Jake had ever seen. The hull was made of some kind of crystal that caught and reflected his flashlight beam in rainbow patterns. The vessel was huge, maybe 200 feet long, but it was clearly damaged. Deep gouges scarred its surface, and one whole section looked like it had been melted by intense heat. Strange symbols ran along the ship's sides, pulsing with the same blue-green light as the cave walls. As Jake got closer, he could see that some of the symbols were dark, their light dead. Whatever powered this thing was failing. The ship rested in a cradle of stone that looked like it had been carved specifically to hold it. Whoever built this place had been planning to stay for a long time. Jake walked around the vessel, his scanner going crazy with readings he couldn't understand. There was an opening in the ship's side, a doorway that seemed to be designed for beings about his size. The edges were smooth, not torn or broken. Someone had opened this door from the inside. Jake stood at the threshold for a long moment. Going inside could be dangerous. The ship was alien, possibly thousands of years old. There could be diseases, radiation, or worse. But the scientist in him was curious, and the storm outside wasn't giving him many options. The inside of the ship was as beautiful as the outside. The walls curved in organic shapes, and soft lights came on as he entered. The air smelled clean, like after a thunderstorm. Everything was sized for beings like humans, but the design was elegant in a way that human technology wasn't. Jake made his way through corridors lined with panels covered in the same pulsing symbols. Some sections were dark, their lights dead. The ship felt empty, abandoned, but his scanner was picking up something deeper inside. The corridor led to what looked like a control room. Curved surfaces covered in symbols surrounded a central chair that faced a large, dark screen. The chair was designed for a humanoid figure, but the proportions were slightly wrong. Whoever sat here had longer limbs and a larger head than a human. As Jake stepped into the room, the screen flickered to life. The symbols on the walls pulsed brighter and a low hum filled the air. Something in the ship's depths was waking up. The screen showed images Jake couldn't understand at first. Star charts maybe, or navigation displays. Then the images changed, showing what looked like a battle in space. Ships that looked like the one he was standing in were fighting something dark and terrible. The dark ships were winning. A voice spoke behind him, and Jake spun around, his heart pounding, but there was no one there. The voice came again, speaking words he couldn't understand. Then, impossibly, the words changed to English. "You should not be here, young one. This place is meant to be hidden." The voice was tired, ancient, but clearly intelligent. It seemed to come from the ship itself, from speakers hidden in the walls. "The storm," Jake said, surprised that his voice worked. "I was hiding from the hurricane." "Hurricane," the voice repeated, as if tasting the word. "Yes, the great wind. It has been growing stronger. My ship's failing systems have been affecting your weather. I had hoped to die quietly, but it seems the end brings complications." Jake's mind reeled. The voice was coming from an alien, something not from Earth, and it was dying. "Who are you?" he asked. "I am Commander Zethara of the Veltar," the voice said, "and I am the last of my kind on this world. I have been waiting in this cave for over 2,000 of your years, waiting for someone like you to find me." Above them, Hurricane Delilah raged on, but Jake barely heard it anymore. He had found something that would change everything. Jake stared at the empty control room, his hands shaking. The voice had to be coming from somewhere, but he couldn't see anyone. The alien ship hummed softly around him, and the symbols on the walls pulsed like a slow heartbeat. "You're really an alien," he said, feeling foolish for stating the obvious. "Yes," Zethara replied, and there was something like amusement in her voice. "Though I prefer to think of you as the alien. This is my ship, after all." A section of the wall shimmered and became transparent. Behind it, Jake could see a chamber filled with a thick, glowing liquid. Floating in the center was a figure that was almost human, but not quite. She was tall and thin, with long limbs and delicate features. Her skin was pale blue, and her large eyes were closed. Tubes and wires connected her to the walls of the chamber. "I am dying," Zethara said simply. "I have been dying for centuries, kept alive only by what remains of my ship's medical systems. They are failing now, like everything else." Jake pressed his hand against the transparent wall. The liquid around Zethara moved slowly, like thick honey. "How long have you been here?" "I crashed on your world in what you would call the year 127 of your common era. My people, the Veltar, were explorers and peacekeepers. We traveled between the stars for thousands of years, helping younger species and learning from older ones." The main screen flickered and showed images of beautiful cities floating in space, connected by bridges of light. Ships like Zethara's moved between them, their crystal hulls gleaming in the light of alien suns. "We were proud of our civilization," Zethara continued. "We thought ourselves wise and advanced, but wisdom means nothing when faced with true evil." The images changed, showing the same beautiful cities under attack. Dark ships swarmed around them like insects, and wherever they touched, the light went out. The crystal ships of the Veltar fought bravely, but they were outnumbered. "The Devourers," Zethara whispered, and Jake could hear the fear in her voice even after 2,000 years. They came from the dark between galaxies, consuming everything in their path. Not just resources or territory, but life itself. They eat the very essence of living things. Jake watched in horror as the beautiful cities fell one by one. What did they want? To feed. The Devourers are not evil in the way you might understand evil. They are more like a disease or a force of nature. They consume because that is what they are. They destroyed civilization after civilization, growing stronger with each world they devoured. The screen showed Veltar ships fleeing in all directions, scattering across the galaxy. My people chose to run rather than make a final stand. We thought it was wisdom. We told ourselves we were preserving our knowledge and culture for a better time. "Maybe you were right," Jake said. "Living to fight another day makes sense." "Does it?" Zethara asked. We scattered to the far corners of the galaxy, hiding on primitive worlds, waiting for the devourers to pass. But they did not pass. They hunted us, following our trail of refugees. One by one, the hidden colonies fell silent. Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cave's temperature. How many of you are left? I do not know. My long-range communications failed centuries ago. I may be the last, or there may be others hiding as I have hidden. But if any survive, they are as alone as I am. The storm outside seemed to grow louder, as if responding to Zethara's words. Jake realized that what he had thought was just bad luck might be something more. You said your ship's systems were affecting our weather, he said. The hurricane that brought me here, did you cause it? Not intentionally, Zethara said. My ship has been buried under this island for 2 millennia. Its power systems have been slowly failing, leaking energy into your planet's electromagnetic field. Your weather patterns have been influenced by this for centuries. Jake thought about the increasingly violent storms that had been hitting the Caribbean in recent years. Scientists blamed climate change, but maybe there was another factor they hadn't considered. The storms have been getting worse lately because my ship is finally dying, Zethara continued. The power fluctuations are stronger now. I had hoped to shut down quietly, but it seems even my death will cause you trouble. Why didn't you contact us sooner? Jake asked. Humans have had radio for over a century. We've been sending signals into space. I know. I have been listening to your broadcasts, learning your languages, watching your species develop. You fascinate me, Jake Martinez. Jake started. You know my name? I know much about you. You have been studying the ocean, life around this island for 3 years. You are passionate about your work, driven to understand the world around you. These are qualities my people value. The screen showed images that made Jake's heart skip. His research station, his boat, even pictures of him working in his laboratory. Zethara had been watching him for years. I have been watching all of humanity, she continued. Your species is remarkable. In 2,000 years you have gone from primitive agriculture to exploring space. Most species take 10 times as long to reach that level of development. Then why didn't you make contact? We could have helped each other. Because of what I learned about your species, Zethara said. You are unlike any race my people ever encountered. Where we chose safety and preservation, you choose risk and growth. Where we flee from danger, you run toward it. You see an impossible challenge and think, how can I overcome this rather than, how can I avoid this? Jake felt a strange pride at her words. That sounds like a good thing. It is. It is the most wonderful and terrifying thing I have ever witnessed. My people thought we were brave because we explored the unknown, but you live your entire lives in the unknown. You are born into uncertainty and somehow thrive in it. The ship's lights flickered and Zethara's voice became weaker. The devourers are coming, Jake. They detected the energy surge when my ship began its final failure. They think they are following the trail of another Veltar refugee. They expect to find a dead world and easy prey. Jake's blood ran cold. How long do we have? 5 of your years, perhaps 6. They travel between stars more slowly than we did. But they are relentless. They will come. Then we need to prepare. You can teach us. I am dying, Jake. My body has been sustained far beyond its natural span. When my ship's systems finally fail, I will die with them. But perhaps there is another way. The storm outside began to quiet, and Jake realized dawn was probably breaking. But he no longer cared about the hurricane. A much bigger storm was coming, and humanity didn't even know it was on the way. The ship's lights dimmed and brightened in a rhythm that reminded Jake of labored breathing. Zethara was fighting to stay alive and losing. There is something I must show you, she said, her voice weaker than before. Something my people discovered, about your species that even you do not know. The main screen came alive with images of Earth, but not the Earth Jake knew. These were scenes from throughout human history, but seen from above, from space. He watched the rise and fall of civilizations, The movement of peoples across continents. The gradual spread of humanity across the globe. We have been watching you since we arrived, Zathara said. At first you were just another primitive species on another world. We expected you to develop like all the others, slowly, carefully, avoiding risk. The images showed early humans leaving Africa, spreading into unknown lands. Jake saw them crossing frozen wastelands, sailing across vast oceans in tiny boats, climbing impossible mountains. Always moving, always pushing into new territory. But you did not develop like the others, Zathara continued. Where other species sought comfort and safety, you sought challenge. You left your comfortable homeland to live in places that could kill you. You sailed into storms, climbed mountains, explored caves like the one you found me in. Jake watched humans building cities in deserts, on mountaintops, even on the water. They took impossible places and made them home. My people tried to understand this behavior. We studied your biology, your psychology, your social structures. What we found changed everything we thought we knew about intelligent life. The screen showed brain scans, genetic maps, psychological profiles. To Jake, it looked like advanced science, but he could tell it was far beyond anything humans had achieved. Most intelligent species develop fear first, then courage, Zathara explained. They learn to avoid danger, then slowly overcome their fears when necessary. But humans are different. You developed courage first. Fear is something you had to learn. Jake thought about that. It was true in a way. Children had to be taught to be afraid of dangerous things. They would run toward fire, jump from high places, pet wild animals if their parents didn't stop them. Your species does not avoid challenges, Zathara said. You seek them out. You climb mountains because they are there. You explore the ocean depths because they are deep. You reach for the stars because they are far away. The images changed to show human achievements that even Zathara's people found remarkable. Humans diving to the deepest parts of the ocean, scaling the highest peaks, exploring the polar regions, always pushing further, always testing limits. When we first encountered the Devourers, my people's first instinct was to flee. We told ourselves it was wisdom, but it was really fear. We ran because running felt safe. The screen showed the great exodus of the Veltar, their beautiful ships scattering across the galaxy like seeds in the wind. But I have watched your species face extinction events before, Zathara said. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, plagues, wars. Each time some of you die, but others adapt. You do not run from the challenge, you find a way through it. Jake saw images of humans surviving the Ice Age, rebuilding after volcanic disasters, overcoming diseases that should have wiped them out. In every case, humanity had emerged stronger. The Devourers expect prey that will run, that will hide, that will try to preserve itself through avoidance. They have never encountered a species that responds to threat by attacking it. You think we'll fight them? Jake asked. I think you will do something my people never considered, Zathara said. I think you will hunt them. The idea sent a shiver down Jake's spine. Hunt a species that had conquered most of the galaxy. It sounded insane. It sounded exactly like something humans would try to do. My ship's memory banks contain everything my people learned about the Devourers, Zathara said. Their technology, their tactics, their weaknesses. Yes, they have weaknesses, though my people were too afraid to exploit them. The screen showed technical diagrams that Jake couldn't understand, but he could tell they were weapons, ships, battle plans. This was military intelligence gathered over centuries of conflict. The Devourers are powerful, but they are not invincible. They rely on fear, on their prey scattering and running. They have never faced an enemy that stood its ground and fought, back with everything it had. Jake felt something stirring in his chest, something that might have been excitement or might have been terror. You want to give us this information? I want to give you more than information, Zathara said. I want to give you something my people never had. The knowledge that you are not alone in this fight. The screen changed again, showing star charts, with dozens of points of light scattered across the galaxy. These are the locations of other Veltar ships, hidden on distant worlds like I have been hidden here. Most have been silent for centuries, their crews probably dead, but some may still survive, waiting as I have waited. Jake stared at the map. Each point represented a potential ally, a source of advanced technology and knowledge. If the survivors could be contacted, if they could be convinced to stop hiding and start fighting. Zathara's voice trailed off. You think they'd help us? I think they would follow you, Zathara said. My people respect courage above all else, and humans are the most courageous species we have ever encountered. If humanity stood up to the devourers, really stood up to them, it would inspire the scattered remnants of a dozen civilizations. The ship shuddered, and several lights went out permanently. Zathara was running out of time. There is a device, she said urgently, a communicator that can reach across the galaxy. It is in my personal quarters. If you can activate it, you can contact the other ships. Wake up the survivors. Jake could hear the desperation in her voice. This was her last hope, her final chance to make a difference. But the choice is yours, she continued. I will not burden your species with this knowledge against your will. You can take the communicator and return to your world as if none of this happened. The devourers will come in 5 years, and humanity will face them unprepared. You might survive or you might not, but you will face them as yourselves, without interference from alien technology or alien wars. Jake thought about the choice she was offering him. He could walk away, keep this secret, let humanity face its fate without knowing what was coming, or he could accept the burden of preparing his entire species for a war they never asked for. Or, Zathara said softly, you can help me wake up the galaxy. You can rally the survivors and teach them what my people never learned. That sometimes, the only way to survive is to stop running and start fighting. The storm outside had passed, but Jake could hear rescue helicopters in the distance. Soon people would be looking for him. Soon, he would have to decide what to tell them. What would you do? He asked. Zathara was quiet for a long moment. I would run, she said finally. I would hide and hope the danger passed. That is what my people always did. But that's not what you're asking me to do. No, she agreed. I am asking you to be human. Jake stood in the dying ship listening to the sound of rescue helicopters growing closer. He had maybe an hour before they found the cave. 1 hour to make a decision that would affect not just humanity, but every surviving civilization in the galaxy. Show me, he said finally. Show me everything. The relief in Zathara's voice was clear. Follow the corridor to your left. The neural interface chamber is there. But Jake, you must understand. This will change you. Once you know what, I know you cannot unknow it. Jake made his way through the ship's curved corridors. The lights were failing one by one, and several passages were completely dark. He found the chamber Zathara had described. It was smaller than the control room, dominated by a chair that looked more like a medical device than furniture. Sit, Zathara instructed. Place your hands on the armrests. Jake hesitated. This was alien technology, thousands of years old. There was no telling what it might do to his brain. I know you are afraid, Zathara said gently. Fear is good. It means you understand the weight of what you are about to accept. But your fear will not stop you, because you are human. Jake sat down. The chair adjusted itself to fit his body, and the armrests warmed under his hands. He could feel something probing at the edges of his mind, gentle but insistent. I will transfer as much as I can in the time we have, Zathara said. The history of my people, the location of the hidden ships, everything we learned about the devourers. But most importantly, I will give you the ability to activate our technology. The probing sensation became stronger. Jake felt like someone was reading through the pages of his memory, learning who he was. It should have been terrifying, but instead it felt oddly comforting. For the first time in his life, he was truly understood by another intelligence. You are even more remarkable than I thought, Zathara whispered. Your mind, it adapts so quickly. Most species require months of preparation for a neural link. You are doing it in minutes. Information began to flow into Jake's consciousness. Not words or images, but pure knowledge. He suddenly understood how the ship's engines worked, how to read the star charts, how to operate weapons that could crack planets in half. The history of the Veltar unfolded in his mind like a movie played at incredible speed. He saw their golden age, when they had traveled between stars in crystal ships, exploring new worlds and making contact with young civilizations. He felt their horror when the Devourers first appeared at the edge of their territory, consuming the Rigel colonies in a matter of days. The war had lasted 3 centuries. The Veltar had superior technology, but the Devourers had numbers and an absolute lack of fear. They threw themselves at Veltar defenses like a tide of darkness, accepting massive losses as long as they could get close enough to feed. "We made a terrible mistake," Zethara said as the memories flowed. "We thought the war was about territory, about resources. We tried to fight them like a conventional enemy. But the Devourers are not conventional. They are a plague, a cancer. You cannot negotiate with cancer. You can only cut it out." Jake saw the fall of the Veltar homeworld, the evacuation fleet scattering in all directions. He felt Zethara's own memories of the crash landing on Earth, her desperate attempts to repair her ship with primitive tools. "The Devourers have a weakness," she continued. "They are a hive mind controlled by creatures they call the Architects. Destroy the Architects, and the lesser Devourers become nothing more than animals. But the Architects hide behind millions of drones. No conventional attack can reach them." More knowledge flooded Jake's mind. Battle tactics, ship designs, the locations of Devourer strongholds throughout the galaxy. But also something else. Hope. Hidden in the memories was the discovery that the Devourers were not as invincible as they seemed. "A human attack would be different," Zethara said. "You do not think like other species. Where we see impossible odds, you see a puzzle to be solved. Where we see certain death, you see acceptable risk." Jake understood what she meant. The Veltar had fought defensively, trying to protect their worlds and civilians. But humans had a different approach to war. They attacked the source of the problem regardless of cost. "The communicator," Zethara said urgently. The ship was shaking now, systems failing throughout the vessel. "In the compartment beneath your chair." Jake reached down and found a small device that fit perfectly in his hand. It was warm to the touch and covered in the same pulsing symbols as the ship's walls. As his fingers touched it, he understood its purpose completely. "This can reach any Veltar ship in the galaxy," Zethara explained. "But it requires enormous amounts of energy. I can power it one last time, but only once. You must choose which ships to contact." Jake's new knowledge told him there were 47 possible targets scattered across known space. Some had been silent for over 1,000 years and were probably dead. Others had sent their last transmissions only decades ago. The ones closest to Earth, he decided. If we're going to rally the survivors, we need to start with the ones who can actually reach us in time. "Wise," Zethara agreed. "I am programming the coordinates now." The neural interface delivered one final burst of information. Languages, customs, the proper protocols for contacting Veltar commanders who had been hiding for centuries. Jake felt like his brain was about to burst from all the new knowledge. "It is done," Zethara said. "You now know everything I know. Use it wisely." The ship's main power core finally failed. Emergency lighting came on, bathing everything in a red glow. Zethara's life support was running on battery power now, and the batteries were almost dead. "I have one last gift for you," she said. "Something I was saving for this moment." The communicator in Jake's hand pulsed brightly. Across the galaxy, on hidden worlds and forgotten moons, ancient Veltar ships began to receive a signal they had never expected to hear again. "I am transmitting your biometric signature to every ship," Zethara explained. "From this moment on, you are officially recognized as a commander in the Veltar fleet. Any surviving ship will acknowledge your authority." Jake felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders. He was no longer just a marine biologist who had stumbled into an alien ship. He was now responsible for preparing 2 species for the greatest war in galactic history. "The helicopters are almost here," Zethara said. "You must go. Take the communicator and return to your world. Tell them what you have learned, or do not tell them." The choice is yours. But know that in 5 years, the devourers will come. And when they do, humanity will either stand as one or fall as individuals. Jake stood up from the chair, his head spinning with alien memories. What about you? I will die as I have lived for the past 2,000 years, Zathara said. Alone, but no longer without hope. You have given me something I thought was lost forever, the belief that the devourers can be defeated. The lights went out completely. In the darkness, Jake could hear Zathara's voice one last time. Tell them the hurricane is coming, Jake Martinez. Tell them you have been waiting for it. Jake emerged from the cave into bright Caribbean sunlight, the Veltar communicator hidden in his jacket pocket. The hurricane had passed, leaving behind a world that looked washed clean but somehow different. Everything looked the same, but Jake knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The rescue helicopter spotted him within minutes. As he was lifted to safety, Jake looked down at the island and saw no sign of the cave entrance. Sometime during the night, it had collapsed, burying Zathara and her ship forever. Whether the collapse was natural or something she had arranged, he would never know. You're lucky to be alive, the paramedic said as they flew toward the mainland. That was one hell of a storm. Jake nodded, not trusting himself to speak. In his pocket, the communicator pulsed gently against his hand. Somewhere across the galaxy, Veltar ships were waking up from centuries of sleep, responding to a signal from a dead commander and a human who had never left his home planet. The next 6 months passed in a blur. Jake returned to his work, but everything felt like he was going through the motions. How do you study fish when you know that planet-eating aliens are coming? How do you worry about research grants when you have the knowledge to build starships? He tried to tell people. First his colleagues, then government officials, then anyone who would listen. Most thought he was suffering from trauma-induced delusions. The few who took him seriously wanted proof, and Jake had none. The cave was gone, the ship was buried, and Zathara was dead. But the communicator still worked. Late at night, alone in his apartment, Jake would hold the device and feel it pulse in response to signals from across the galaxy. 3 Veltar ships had answered the call so far. 3 commanders who had been hiding in the dark for centuries, suddenly faced with the impossible news that someone was finally ready to fight back. The breakthrough came when Jake realized he didn't need to convince everyone. He just needed to convince the right people. Instead of talking about aliens and galaxy-spanning wars, he started talking about advanced technology and climate change. The hurricane data was his key. Jake's research into storm patterns showed clear evidence of electromagnetic interference affecting weather systems worldwide. The interference had a pattern, a signature that could be tracked and measured. When he presented his findings to the United Nations Climate Council, he had their full attention. The source appears to be artificial, Jake explained to the packed auditorium. Something is affecting Earth's magnetic field in ways that amplify natural weather patterns. If we can identify and neutralize this source, we might be able to prevent the increasingly severe storms that have been devastating coastal regions. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was true enough. The questions came fast and urgent. Where was the source? How long had it been active? Could it be stopped? Jake answered carefully, revealing just enough to maintain credibility while keeping the most incredible parts of the story hidden. Yes, the source appeared to be artificial. Yes, it was probably very old. And yes, he believed it could be neutralized, but it would require international cooperation and significant resources. Within a week, Jake found himself appointed as the director of the newly formed International Electromagnetic Research Initiative. His mandate was simple: find the source of the interference and stop it. His real mission was far more complex: prepare humanity for a war they didn't know was coming. The research facility they built for him was perfect. Located on a private island in the Pacific, it was officially dedicated to studying electromagnetic phenomena. Unofficially, it became humanity's first center for reverse engineering alien technology. Jake assembled his team carefully. Climate scientists, engineers, physicists, computer programmers, the best minds he could find, all working on projects they thought were related to weather control. Only Jake knew they were actually building humanity's first line of defense against the Devourers. The Veltar technology was incredibly advanced, but it was designed to work with human minds. Jake found he could understand the principles even when the math was beyond him. More importantly, he could teach others. The knowledge transfer Zathara had given him wasn't just information. It was the ability to learn and adapt alien concepts to human thinking. Dr. Lisa Park was the first to achieve a breakthrough. Working on what she thought was an experimental weather monitoring system, she actually created humanity's first functioning force field generator. The look of wonder on her face when the energy barrier first appeared reminded Jake why he loved working with scientists. "The power requirements are incredible," she said, studying the readings. "This thing is drawing energy from... I don't know where it's drawing energy from. The equations don't make sense." "Keep working on it," Jake told her. "Sometimes the most important discoveries don't make sense at first." One by one, his team achieved what they thought were impossible breakthroughs. Advanced materials that were stronger than diamond but lighter than aluminum. Engines that seemed to violate the laws of physics. Communication systems that could send messages faster than light. The world outside began to take notice. Other nations demanded access to the research. Corporations offered billions for the technology. Military leaders asked pointed questions about potential weapons applications. Jake deflected them all. This wasn't about profit or national advantage. This was about species survival. But he couldn't say that, so he talked about climate change and international cooperation instead. The real validation came 2 years into the project. Jake was alone in his office when the communicator suddenly blazed with activity. A new signal, stronger than any he had received before. Someone was trying to make direct contact. The voice that spoke to him was tired, but determined. "Commander, Velshan of the Veltar ship Hidden Star, calling from a moon orbiting Alpha Centauri. I received the wake-up signal," Velshan said in accented but clear English. "I have been monitoring your planet's communications for months. What you are doing is unprecedented. No species has ever attempted to unite their entire world for a single purpose." Jake looked out his window at the research facility. Scientists from 37 countries worked side by side, sharing knowledge and resources without regard for national borders. It was exactly what humanity needed to do on a larger scale. "Can you help us?" Jake asked. "I am already on my way," Velshan replied. "My ship will reach your system in 18 months. By then you must be ready to take the next step." "Which is?" "Telling your species the truth. All of it." Jake had been dreading this moment, but he knew it was inevitable. Humanity couldn't fight the Devourers while believing they were just dealing with climate change. Sooner or later, the full truth would have to come out. "How do I convince 8 billion people that aliens are coming to destroy Earth?" "You do not convince them," Velshan said. "You show them. When my ship arrives, when they see Veltar technology, with their own eyes they will believe. The question is whether they will unite or fragment when faced with the truth." Jake thought about human history, about how his species reacted to existential threats. Sometimes they came together. Sometimes they tore themselves apart. The difference often came down to leadership. "We'll be ready," he said, hoping it was true. 3 years later, Jake stood before the assembled leaders of every nation on Earth. Above them, visible through the glass ceiling of the United Nations building, hung a ship that was impossible to deny. The Hidden Star had arrived exactly on schedule, its crystal hull gleaming in the afternoon sun. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jake began, "I have something to tell you about hurricanes." He told them everything. About Zathara and her 2,000-year vigil. About the Devourers and their endless hunger. About the choice humanity now faced. Unite and fight or die as individuals. The questions came like a storm. Accusations, demands for proof, cries of hoax and conspiracy. But through it all, the ship hung in the sky above them, undeniable and impossible. In the end, it was the president of Brazil who asked the only question that mattered. "What do you need from us?" Jake smiled. It was exactly the kind of question a human would ask. Not, "How do we avoid this?" or "Can we negotiate?" But "What do we need to do to win?" "Everything," Jake said. The Devourers will be here in 2 years. We need to turn our entire civilization into a weapon. Every factory, every laboratory, every military base, we need to stop thinking like separate nations and start thinking like one species. And if we do this, the president asked, can we win? Jake thought about Zethara's last words, about the hurricane that had chased him into a cave and changed everything. I don't know if we can win, he said honestly, but I know we'll try, and sometimes trying is enough. Outside, the hidden star's hull pulsed with the same blue-green light as the symbols in Zethara's ship. Across the world, television broadcasts carried the image to every corner of the planet. Humanity had 2 years to prepare for the fight of its existence. The hurricane had finally arrived. But this time, instead of running from it, humanity was going to fly straight into its eye.